I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man,
On this
that
sad
is a
clown.
sad clown.
Proud of my address.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3 Omaha Packs, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
Thankful to have space to talk to this guy today. He was recently the leader at Futurama, was the site Q there. His name is something that I hear my kids ask for often, so we'll be curious to hear the story there. And I just reflecting back, remember several pre-runs with this guy and just having some great conversation about life and work and family. And so Mac and Cheese, I'm just grateful to have you on the show today. As you know, we have millions of listeners, so they'll all be curious to know how did it start? So what was the process for you? Who EH'd you? What was the first workout? And where does the name Mac and Cheese come from?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me. It's obviously been a journey, and I've appreciated so much of it over the last coming up on almost 3 years now. So kind of a crazy wild ride. But so my EH story, so Sparty EH'd me. So I work with Sparty here at Carson. We'd worked for a number of years together, and then he actually left and then came back, and there's a whole nother story we could dive into there. But I actually we'll say EH Sparty to get into his first Spartan race. So his name came from going on Spartan races with us, and we started doing that as a team here at work. Convinced him to come out and do it and said he'd be great at it. So the second year that I ran a Spartan race, I brought out Mark, who's now named Sparty. And so that was how he got into it. And then he'd been dripping on me. He'd asked me a couple of times, like, hey, I started working out with this group. Let me know when you're training for your next Spartan. And it'd be fun to come out and do it. He actually told me that the Murph is the best training for a Spartan.
Oh, okay.
Which I think I agree with.
Oh.
So then come November, it was right after my birthday, and Golden Spike was my site that I got EH'd at and finally said I'd come out and do it. No Dose, which was on the queue, which is a really interesting lineage story. You know, No Dose launched Futurama and then passed it to Othello, and No Dose named me, and then Othello passed it to me. And so there's just been this really interesting tie back to everybody around Futurama. And so once he got me out, and he brought me out in this really interesting spot in my fitness journey where, I'd lost a ton of weight. So I started right after college. I was, 235, 240 pounds is the highest I weighed myself. Probably 15 pounds heavier than that was the heaviest that I ever was. And I really went into this, all right, I joined this big gym. I got really into personal training and fitness and losing all this weight. And I was up at early workouts, and I was, trying to eat better. And it was this culture that we created at the place that I work, and was there with a bunch of work people. And so I started doing that, and I capped it off by doing Spartan races and climbing mountains and getting into all this shape. And then what I found was that, life kind of crept back in, and I was having a really hard time maintaining this. Like everything was all about events. Like I'd go climb a mountain, or I'd go to a Spartan race, and I would train for something. And F3 kind of came to me in this spot of, I'd started to put some weight back on. I wasn't going to the gym very often. I'd started to make poor eating choices, and starting to creep back up. Like I wasn't back to where I was before, but I was not doing great. And so Sparty brought me out. And I posted a couple of times, but it's winter and it's Omaha, and nobody wanted to post the rest of winter.
No.
So really, I count my true EH day closer to May of the next year, which is when I finally got on the scale and looked at myself and said, like, I'm not doing something, and I need to do something. I've gone through that winter, and was we'll get into this in a little bit, but was having conversations with my wife about whether we're ready to have kids and all this stuff. And I just knew that I needed something from a fitness perspective. And so I reached back out to Sparty and said, when are you queuing next? And so I jumped on the next time he was queuing.
Nice.
So that's my story. The mac and cheese, just to round that one out. He so mac and cheese came from, I was walking into the circle and talking with Sparty, and at my wedding we had really good mac and cheese. So like there was a topic of conversation around mac and cheese, and then I said to the guys that like I like to cook, and Nodo's was like, "What, mac and cheese?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, mac and cheese," thinking like something creative, and he's like, "No, Kraft mac and cheese." So that's where the name comes from. It goes well. A couple of guys I've have had like names that are built off of the mac and cheese name. So, happy with it.
Yeah, you got side dish and what's the other one? There's a
So side dish, and then side dish brought somebody that was casserole.
casserole. Okay, nice.
So,
Love it.
we kind of worked through the naming
That's
convention.
that's awesome. So I'm curious. I want to get your thoughts on this because I had a couple guys recently share with me essentially like the Pogo 40, right? From free to lead, like that. That's
Yep.
kind of their journey, and it's interesting that you pinpointed the like the events or what kind of kept you going, which kudos to you for the self-awareness there. But curious the impact that has, as we're coming up September is kind of suicide awareness, mental health kind of stuff. I mean, from your perspective, I mean, is that just as much a mental battle as it is a physical fitness battle?
It's absolutely a mental battle for me. And I know everyone is different. So my background with like food and diet, my family's talked about this a lot. Like my parents made it very clear from a very young age that I was going to struggle with weight because they had always struggled with weight, and it just was part of our family's life journey.
Hmm.
It meant a lot to me that they acknowledged that. I don't think I recognized that when I was a young kid, but it was something we talked about. And I grew up playing sports. I played soccer, played football, basketball, anything that was out there and had a ball, I played it, and I loved it. And it was really easy to stay fit because I could eat just about anything, and I'd go run it off at soccer practice, and I'd go, whatever it was, and then I stopped playing, and I slowed down and wasn't playing as competitively anymore. And all of a sudden, get to college, and beer and pizza tastes a hell of a lot better than going to the gym every day, and you just kind of lose track. And like I always had in the back of my head that my parents had talked about this, so this was something I was going to struggle with. But I didn't have a good outlet for figuring out how to deal with the mental side of that over just I need to go to the gym. And getting up off the couch to go to the gym is more of the mental battle than knowing. Like I knew that I needed to go to the gym.
Right. Yeah, that difference between knowing and doing for sure. One, and I guess in F3 maybe it's the second F then that kind of motivates you to come out. Something I want to hear kind of as you joined F3, how did you build some of those relationships? I think Othello, who I've had a chance to talk to recently, he commented on just your ability to get vulnerable in those spaces, and so maybe that was a strategy. But talk to us a little bit about that as you came in. How did you meet new guys or develop those relationships to hold you accountable?
Yeah, it was tough at first. I think one of the hardest things for me is, and you and I talked about this on pre-runs. I tend to be on the younger end of some of the guys in F3. Like we've built a great community that spans a lot of different age groups right now. But especially when we first started, it felt like there was a lot of guys in that like late 30s, early 40s age range.
Yeah.
And it was hard to relate to a lot of them because here I am having conversations with my wife about, are we ready to start a family? And you're talking about kids or guys who have kids that are talking about going to high school and college. And they're just different places. And I was struggling with who and how and where to be vulnerable about the stuff that I was struggling with, while also being supportive of the guys that I was around, knowing what they're struggling with. But then I kind of got a little reflective on this. I mean, I've always been that guy. I'm that guy at work. My peers at work are always older than me. I was an only child growing up, and a lot of my people that I spent a lot of time with were my parents' friends because I'm an only child and I get brought to everything. You don't get a chance to stay home with the babysitter and the three other kids when you're an only child. They just bring you with you to things with adults. And so I think as soon as I checked my feelings about that and thinking that I was a burden on people and that they didn't want to hear my problems because they weren't their problems, and started to be more of a active listener versus just like a dump of all the things that I was feeling. I found it a lot easier to be vulnerable and to share and to be, share what was going on in my life and find the guys around me, whether they were 28 or 65, had some insights to be able to share with what I was dealing with and what I was struggling with.
Right.
But I think it had to start with me checking like what my perception of everyone's opinion of me was. And the last thing I'll say about that, when I took over Futurama, so Othello is a huge character in F3 Omaha. Obviously, like we love him. Everyone knows his voice, and there's a he's the life of the party and has a lot of friends. And I always posted at Futurama, and we'd have 35, 40 guys. And it just happened that around the same time that I took over the Shovel Flag, we launched 2 other sites that were going to help starfish and pull people away. And I'll never forget my first queue after launch, and I show up and there's like 11 guys there. And I'm saying to myself, I'm like, does anyone like me? Do I have friends? Like, was Othello the reason people came to Futurama because they liked him, and now they don't like me? And like, that's a very real feeling of that. As soon as I got over that myself and said, no, it's not about you. It's about the fact that we have small workout groups, and they're small for a reason. Like, I can get much more vulnerable and honest with people in a group of 11 or 12 than I can in a group of 40. And so that's a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing, but we got to check our ego at the door for that a little bit.
Yeah, that used to always get to me with the, pretty much every time I lead a workout, right? I'm like, I think I'm the strategy a SiteQ will use if they want to slow the numbers down. Have me queue. But and like you said, it's not about me, and I'm just thankful I get to lead whoever decides to show up. That's 2 guys or 40 or whatever it might be. I love that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of guys go through that, especially in the FIQ role, and it's ultimately not about the numbers, right?
No. And then when we launched Canyon and stuff downtown and had some numbers things too, like I've led workouts down there with one other person.
Yeah.
There's been a couple times where I've shown up and no one shows up for another 15 minutes, because it's covered in snow and no one could get back there. It's you got to change your perspective of what you can get from those moments. And I wouldn't trade those moments and those stories for anything now. But in the moment, you're sitting there being like, there's only 2 of us. Are we really going to get anything done today? That's an honest feeling in the moment.
Yeah. Well, so tell me, because a lot of guys will say, from a second F perspective, like the cafeteria, or maybe it's participating in Queen service, or some of those things are what create the kind of the stickiness of the second F. But it sounds like maybe your experience has been almost like finding those sites or taking advantage of maybe the smaller workout groups and being consistent with building relationships there. Am I reading that right? Or what's your thought there?
Absolutely. And I think cafeteria is a huge part. I think it's we set the standard from a leadership perspective that there's going to be a site with coffee every day, and that we set that standard and then allow everyone to make it what they want it to be. You get out of it what you put into it. Some sites do more at cafeteria than others, and it morphs into what that site wants. But I think what I've especially found over the last couple of years, as we've expanded so much, is that the second F to me is more, where do you find the community of guys that you're super close with? And like, my community has become the more East Omaha guys. Like, I live on 180th and Pacific. I live like the farthest away. When I was site Q at Futurama, I drove past literally every other site in Omaha to get to my site on Thursdays.
Yep.
But it was my community, so I didn't care. It's 4:15 in the morning, 4:45 in the morning. No one's on the road. It takes me 15 minutes to get there, and you do it. And I think that is exactly to your point, that like, that's the second F community to me, is finding the guys that I'm going to see 2 or 3 days a week, and that are going to check in on me, and I'm going to check in on them. And now, does it mean, do I get sad sometimes? You and I don't go on pre-runs as often anymore, and I don't see guys as much. Yeah, sure. There's stuff that I miss. But we all need to have our communities that are going to be that support system in the times that we need it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think between like, Tater and myself and Flow Pitch, right? I don't know that we've landed on a home for us because we're, I mean, if you just try to keep up with the shovel passes and the launches, you're in a different part of town every other day. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's one of the things I've been a little bit, trying to be first FQ is a little bit challenging, right? Because I feel like it would be great if I could just go to this one site every Tuesday, but I kind of feel some responsibility to venture out. But so I'm glad that you found some of that consistency because I do think, um, we've got the khakis polar challenge or try to get out to all the sites, and we've kind of encouraged guys to try new sites. But ultimately, there is some tremendous value in the consistency and like knowing, hey, on Saturdays I'm going to be at the canyon with my people, right? Or at the, wherever that site is. So I'm glad you've taken advantage of that. What about when you think about second F, like some of the other things that come to mind maybe are like Queen Service, we've done book studies, Q Source. Have you had a chance to participate in any of those other things?
Yeah. So I think this will tell everyone a little bit about me is like I've tried all of them because that's who I am. Like somebody's like, hey, we're gonna go do this. I'm like, sure, I'm absolutely in for that. And then I get halfway into it and I'm like, I really don't want to commit to a book study at 4:30 every morning on a Tuesday. Like I just don't want to. So I need to be better. Like that's something I know about myself. I just need to be better about not over committing myself. But we'll digress from that for a second. So the ones that have really stuck with me is I've done Queen Service a couple of times now, as I mentioned kind of in the intro, like weight and struggling with weight and diet have always been and will always be a part of my life. Like it is. And Queen Service has really helped to be a good, safe space for me to have a group of guys that also struggle with that. And especially thinking about like my M is somebody who doesn't struggle with that at all. She's never struggled with weight and she's never struggled with that. So having a community where I can share what those struggles are, and she's incredibly supportive and has done a lot of great things with me in that, but it's just not her battle. Right. And so having that community of guys that have gone through it, are going through it, can be a joint accountability is really meaningful and powerful. I think the piece that kind of a goal I have for myself that I haven't done a great job of doing much of is like figuring out and solidifying like that idea of a shield lock.
Yeah.
And getting we kind of do it informally. And like there's a moment that I know we're all kind of waiting for of like sitting down and being like, will you be a part of my shield lock? Will you be part of my accountability circle? Yeah. And I think that's what's missing because that's been the group that I want to go deeper in, book studies or every mental battle or Q Source or those types of things together. It's like I've participated in them and I love them and I know in moments when I need them, they're there. So I'll go find a site that's doing Q Source because I know I need that check-in that week. But I know that's kind of the next step for me is finding that shield lock of guys that could be like, okay, here's the 3 or 4 or 5 guys that we're gonna get through this together.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that's been, and I think we're getting better. I think we have a few, shield locks that have formed that are, really developing some good, I guess from my mindset, they're like processes or standards that they're using and following Q Source. But I think I've struggled with that too, because as we just moved, so we're way out, 225th and, north part of town. And so I moved away from the guys that were my shield lock, and they talk about, proximity being a really important piece of that. And so you think, okay, well, how do you make that something that's, just a part of your day to day? So I'm with you, man, in that struggle. That's been a challenge for me for a few years, for sure. I'm curious too. So as so we know you like to get vulnerable, kind of be involved with a smaller group of guys. You talked about kind of trying to make this decision about family. How do you feel like you had good support or guys to bounce ideas off as you were making some of those decisions as a family, or how did that go?
Yeah, I think F3. It's kind of a weird way to think about it, but I owe a lot of like how happy I am in my marriage and having our daughter now to the guys of F3. Because there's, so to back up for a second, like this, the struggles that we were having was, my wife and I did all through college and got married a couple years after school. And we'd always set this kind of timeline in our head of a year after we get married, we were going to start talking about having a family. And I think I've shared this with you. And like in my wife's mind, or in my M's mind, that was a year in and we're going to start having a family. And in my mind, I'm like a year in and let's start talking about when we're ready to have a family.
Right.
And like, I liked our life. I liked we were dual income, no kids. We could travel. We had a dog, but you drop him off at a border and go for a week.
Right.
Can't
do that with kids.
Can't do that with kids. And sometimes it feels like you do, but like that was a struggle, and it was a strain on our marriage, and it was a strain on our relationship and our family and everything. And there's two groups of people that really helped me through that, and F3 was a big part of it. And then I've got some really great friends and mentors at work. And I was hearing this consistent message from all of them, and it didn't matter who I heard it from, and they said it different ways, but in my head, it kind of boiled down to, are you with the person you want to be with? Yes. Do you know you want a family at some point? Yes. And this is going to sound really crass, but like, do you think you're going to have more money in your 20s or more money in your 50s? I hope more money in my 50s. Well, if you want all those things, would you rather be able to have more money and freedom and time, whatever that looks like to you, when you're still in your 50s and you're young enough to go do things with your spouse and your family and have that type of experience? Or do you want that now in your 20s and your wife and you want to go backpack and you want to go do all that different stuff? And no answer is wrong. It just had to be the right decision for us. And it kind of finally clicked in my head where I'm like, yes, I want all of these things.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I needed that kind of security blanket, or the community of people who are like telling me that, yes, your thought process is right, and just keep moving through it. And then also gave me the courage to have those conversations with my M, that when I wasn't ready, like I wasn't, a year wasn't enough time for me. Like I needed 2 years and needed that extra time to be ready. And now, my daughter is 16 months and love her to death. And now starts everyone's conversation of when are you gonna have number two. But it's more of, I couldn't be in the position to be the dad I am today if we had kids right away.
Yeah, I love that. And it's to me, like, the idea of invigorating or reinvigorating male community leadership is so simple, right? It's as simple as equipping you to have that conversation with your M, and lead your family even before you have kids. I mean, I love that example. I think that's fantastic. And the fact that you were seeking advice, I think so often, like, we don't probably get enough advice on huge decisions. And I think, I don't know, at least my parents, I know they weren't married before my oldest brother was born, and I think that's how a lot of our parents maybe were. But anyway, so I'm curious then, because then a lot of this stuff is challenging, right? So making the decision is one thing, but then going through supporting your aunt when she's pregnant or having a newborn, man, we could have a separate show on just that. But
Yeah.
talk to me about faith, or maybe your spiritual journey. How has that gone the last few years?
Yeah. So my faith journey has been an interesting one. So rewind way back. My family and I didn't go to church when I was a little kid, but then I was around 7 or 8 years old. And again, this will surprise no one that knows me, that I'm a very social person. And apparently right around 7 or 8, I said to my parents, well, all my friends get to hang out on Sundays. Why don't we go to church? Because they got to hang out on Sundays and I didn't get to see my friends on Sundays because they were at church. So let's go to church because that's where all my friends are. So that's how my family started going to church. And then my parents ended up getting involved, and we were kind of non-denominational Christian. We grew up Presbyterian, and then the church became non-denominational Christian, and they bounced between different churches for a while there. I went to a Catholic high school, to be honest, more to play soccer and for the education than anything to do with it being a Catholic school. But that helped to inform my decisions that led me to Creighton, that led me to Omaha, that got me to where I am today. So I would never trade it for a million years. And I remember a very distinct conversation with it was my dad, one of my parents, maybe both of them. And I'd always wanted to go to USC, and I wanted to play soccer at USC in Southern California, and that was the goal. That was the plan. And I'm sitting there on campus, and my dad or mom, who it was, like, they're missing a faith aspect. Like, there's no, I didn't like a lot of the schools that were like, you have to swipe into church 5 days a week to say that you're a good Christian because you swiped your badge into church. But I also wanted a place where I could have a community that was faith-based, and I didn't know what that meant for me yet, but I just knew that I needed a place where that was okay to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Which led me to Creighton, which then my sophomore year, I converted to Catholicism. So, and I kind of thought about it along the way in different points. And it really, I identify a lot with the Jesuit teachings of the Catholic faith. And, the Jesuits as an educational body within the Catholic Church believe in a lot of the, faith through education and works and the people. And it's all about the people that make up the church, and very mission driven and things like that. So my faith journey has often been centered around that, like wanting a community that was going to find ways to practice their faith in and around other people. And so I would say, we're practicing Catholics. We go to mass at St. John's every Sunday, 3 Sundays out of the month. Let's be honest about that. I can't say I go every week, but things do come up. But the thing that I find really interesting about that with my Em and I and our daughter, like, again, back to kind of the where's your community at? We live again at 180th and Pacific, and we go to mass at 24th and Dodge, because that's our community, and that's who we identify with. And not that there aren't other great Catholic churches around Omaha, and there's ones that we go to when it's convenient, all that stuff. But like, our community that we participate in and are actively involved in is the St. John's community at Creighton. It's where we feel most comfortable. And so I think that community aspect and the service aspect, and finding people is really where I drive my third F, or my faith aspect of this.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're right. I mean, community is so important to faith, right? Because when life happens, then having a shared faith community around you is fantastic. And as you were telling that story there, I realized that, and you maybe have told me this before, but where are you from originally? Because
so Sacramento, California. Grew up outside of just outside of Sacramento.
Okay, perfect. So for guys that don't know, or maybe that forgot, that's interesting. So you got all the way here from California.
I'm one of those weird ones that like comes from California to the Midwest.
Yeah.
And everyone says, why in the world would you ever do that?
Yeah.
But again, maybe it's a weird theme in my life that I haven't even realized until I started saying it out loud here. But like, this idea of community. I visited a lot of colleges, a lot of places I wanted to go to school, and Creighton felt at home. So I felt like it was big enough that I could do anything, but small enough that I would still have a support system if I failed.
Yeah.
And I think that's this idea of community is a community should push your boundaries to try something new, but then be there to catch you when you fall. Yeah. And no matter where we are in life, like, it's important to have those types of communities around you.
Yeah, man, I love that. That's some you're dropping some wisdom there. I like that. push you, but then catch you when you fall. I like that. You're absolutely right. And yeah, I think what's so cool is no matter where a guy is at, if he's got an established faith or, a church or a belief system, when they come into F3, just like with the fitness aspect, right? We're going to meet you where you're at, and we're not prescribing a certain way. I think your story exactly, kind of describes that or illustrates that. You've had your own unique journey, and I think as you have opportunities, you share it with other guys. That I'm curious your thoughts, because so we also want to, one of our things is trying to build leadership skills. So, as you think about, fitness, fellowship, and faith, and there's, a lot of different pieces, but then, building guys into leaders, we kind of talk about like VQs or leading a site. What was your VQ like? Do you remember that experience?
I do. So my VQ was at Futurama. And again, I'll say a lot of incredible things about Othello because he's definitely been a friend and a mentor and support through all of this. And I don't think there's anything I could ever say to share with him how much he means to me. And we just keep doing that through action throughout life. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that I'll never be able to say in words what he and a lot of other guys in F3 mean to me. But in true Othello fashion, I got like a really detailed email that had like, this is how much time you should be spending on Warmerama, and this is how much time you should be spending on the pre-thing and the thing and all that kind of stuff. And I sent him back this is what my plan was, and this, all everything, and he critiqued it, and he said, I think you're gonna have too much time running between this place and that place, like maybe you shorten the distance, and got through all of that stuff.
Mhm.
Went in and did it and had a lot of fun doing it. And I think that was the most important thing about Futurama, and something that I think Othello and Noto set the standard. And I hope I continued and Demogorgon continues after me, is it should be a place to be creative and be fun and to try new things and to fail and you have a community that's going to pick you up and support you. So that being said, but yeah, that was my DQ. Had some fun with it. And then in true me fashion, I think I signed up to Q like 4 times in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because like I did it once, I could do it 100 times.
Right.
And so my personal favorite story in that was I was at the Coliseum, and it was one of those where I planned on having like a 20-ish guy number and show up, and there's almost 60,
Oh.
50 plus guys there. And
Yeah.
I'd had this thing more planned out for the field, and I'd printed out or I'd written down like 3 wankies to explain what we were doing, but like 3 wankies is not enough for 50 guys.
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget the finally working out. I was next to Khakis as we were doing this workout, and he's grumbling, and he's like, I don't know what we're doing next, and like, where's the wanky, where's the training? And I'm like, you know what? This is a good, like, you think you can do everything and that you're all prepared, but at some point you're going to just show up and you're going to be like, wow, there's 50 guys here and I have enough information for like 20.
Right.
And you just figure it out and learn how to lead on the fly. And,
Yeah.
I'd be better prepared for it now because of that experience. And the biggest validation I got from after that was, Kathy's walked up to me at the end of the beatdown and was like, hey man, that was a great beatdown and you handled having, 3 times as many people really well. And I'm like, that was the validation I needed there, from a great example of another leader sharing with me that, it was okay that I didn't have a plan for triple the numbers.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. What a great story too. And that's exactly the point, right? Is like equipping you to lead, and then, as opportunities or things come up that you didn't plan for, being there to support, just like the community example. So I love that. So curious, I do Feud, and I feel like I remember you getting on the queue schedule a bunch more times, because it's fun to queue, right?
It is.
Tell me about, just kind of the process of taking over the shovel flag at Futurama, and then would also love to hear, the journey to identify a successor and kind of passing the flag to Demogorgon.
Yeah. So taking over at Futurama, I think I shared a little bit before, like I felt like I had massive shoes to fill.
Mhm.
But what I really wanted to do was to make it my own and to bring things that were important to me. So like I did things, like said, I wanted to have a pre-run before every beatdown because that was something I enjoyed doing and I was going to bring it. And sometimes I was the only one there. But by the end, there's at least 3 or 4 of us every time that would go do a pre-run.
Yeah.
And then having the site queue. So I was site queue through the birth of our daughter and, throughout basically her first year of life. And I guess I took it over just after she was born. And honestly, it's what kept me plugged in with F3 in a lot of moments where the only time I could post was Thursday mornings. And like I wanted to go more and I wanted to do more. And I struggled with how to be present at home and support my wife who was dealing with a newborn and then also being a site queue. But I knew that Thursdays were something we had talked about ahead of time and said, like, this is going to be my day and I'm going to post Thursday mornings.
Right.
And I'd purposely not book work travel and I'd purposely try to avoid, because that was what I needed. And everyone's different, but that's what I needed. And it kept me plugged in, that I knew if I was only there once a week, I was there once a week and I would be at Futurama and I'd have that covered. Um, and then the passing off the Demi. So identifying Demi was an easy thing. To be honest, he came to me like the second week I was site Q and was like, "When you're done, I want it." And I'm like, "Okay, great."
Okay.
Like the next year, I'm off the hook. I don't have to look for anybody. Like it's yours if you want it. We're good.
Uh,
Um, but I think what I found over time was like I had to figure out more of I put my identity into Futurama and then make sure that he was set up for success. And that was a couple things. One, like getting his Q schedule and things booked out, but like a moment of so like helping him get ready and pass it off and everything. But I also think that the last two things I say about the being site Q is first, I, I think a year was right for me. Like I got to the end and I'm like, I'm ready to pass this off to somebody. And I think it's in great hands with Demi to make it his own and to make it his own community. And he's done a great job of carrying that torch. But second, I don't think I was acknowledging in myself how important being a site Q was and like a feeling of a loss of identity coming into passing it off. And I shared at the handoff and in front of a lot of guys and I've struggled in my own way with how do I handle stress and anxiety and pressures at work and I'll admit that like my go-to way is to mask that pain by drinking or going out, ignoring my responsibilities, I guess would be the best way to describe it. Is like I will put a mask over all of it and I'll just cover it up because I'm feeling this way, but I can't let anyone know that.
mm,
I really struggled with leading up to it, and I felt like I was disappointing people, and it like all blew up.
mm,
And it blew up in the sense of emotions and things are going on at work and things are going on at home, and I hadn't been plugged into the community, and I bury all of that stuff until I explode, and I know that about myself, but I do it over and over again.
mm,
And so the handoff to me was the catalyst of this. Like, we know you build up all this pressure and you should let a little bit out at a time, a little bit at a time. And I just hadn't been doing that. And I
mm.
just let it explode. But in the moment, I had a bunch of guys come around me and give me hugs and tell me it was okay and support me and drag me out the next couple of weeks and say, you need to post and you need to talk to guys and and I'm in a better spot now. I'm not fixed,
Mhm.
but I'm in a better spot to be able to talk about like where I was at in those moments. And there are things that like my best friend in the world is spreadsheet and we post together all the time and there's stuff I couldn't even talk about or admit with him.
Yeah.
Like, we talk every day
Mm.
and I'm hiding from him. I'm hiding from my wife. I'm hiding from every guy that we post with.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. That's a long-winded way of saying like what this being site Q meant in leadership and passing it off. Like I spent too much time letting it build up and it kind of exploded. But again, back to the community, I had a great community of people who just picked me up, gave me a hug, and said, "We love you and we don't care."
Yeah. Yeah. I had the opportunity to be there for that. And I think just the authenticity, just showing up and sharing where you were that day, I think was really cool, at least, from my perspective. And then just being able to support you, in that space. I think that's one of my favorite things, right? Is like we're supporting a guy where he's at and we'll offer help and resources and whatever we can to like, help you towards a better path. But we're also like, there's really no judgment. There's no like shame, so like I think to your point, like having that community where you can share, just where you're at, what's difficult right now. Because so many of us learn, right? I learned that from my parents that like you don't want to tell people what's really going on because if they really know, well then, then they'll be disappointed. Nobody will want to hang out with you or whatever the story is that we tell
Yeah,
ourselves. Yeah, and I,
totally.
I really appreciate that, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
I am curious too, as you were a site Q and, just want to pick your brain here, but any advice for like a new guy, or maybe it's new site Qs or just F3 Omaha in general, any advice or insight to kind of keep growing, but growing and being mindful of the men that we're trying to lead?
So, we say it a lot, but really diving into what does it mean to lean in,
Hmm.
like to finding that community and the guys that you can be vulnerable with, that you can cry in front of, that you can, break down in tears, and you just can't physically hold yourself up anymore because you've got the weight of the world and every pressure that's hitting you from all different angles. And whatever that pressure is, like, it's different for every guy, but finding like that community that is gonna you can lean into, the guys that you can lean on, that even if they don't know it, like I'll call out somebody like a Merit Badge. Merit Badge was there, when I handed off the shovel pass to Demi, and like just him texting me every week and saying, hey, we're doing Frisbee at the Canyon on Saturday. I didn't need to talk about like any of the stresses or things that were going on in my life. It was just a consistent, we're going to be there on Saturday.
Yeah.
Another one being Doppler, like Doppler reaching out to me and saying, hey, I'm posting here on Tuesday. You want to come?
Yeah.
Oh, can't make it. I'm going to be here on Thursday.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, can't make it. I'll be there here on Friday. Like that consistency of guys to lean in on. And I think that's the same for site queues. I think it's the same for new PAX members. I think it's the same for everybody. Like just finding a people that you can lean in on, and that are going to call you on your BS too. Like that's a dumb excuse. I'll see you tomorrow at 5:30.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
8 o'clock right now. You can go to bed before 10. I'll see you at 5:30.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the advice is to find somebody, text them and tell them where you're posting tomorrow to encourage them. Because I'm with you, especially like after having a kid, or it starts getting colder and you're like, well, I'm not really planning to meet anybody anywhere, and so like I could just sleep in, or like for me, I can just go for a run here. I don't need to drive anywhere. But I love that, man, and I really do. Just your leadership, your vulnerability, just the way that you carry yourself, and the way that you're open, right? About none of us are a finished, complete product. There's always a future iteration, right? So I do just kind of one last question here. I know I want to respect your time, but I do want to just give you space to share maybe what, if we see you out there in the gloom, what would be encouraging, or how can we be praying for you, encouraging you in your life right now?
Yeah, I think it's a big thing for me is what I've been mentioning, like guys are reaching out to just say, hey, I'm gonna be here to post. I'm gonna be here for the consistency. And then I think the thing, so I'm going through a lot of transitions right now in work and other things. And I think the stuff that I need the most help and support in is finding the consistency. Because when things change, like finding things that are consistent. And so, when I see guys out in the gloom and I see consistent faces out there, it's calming to me. And it's yeah.
Yeah, got it. No, I love that. I think that it's spot on. Well, let's do a Name-orama here. Sound good?
Cool. Sounds great.
Brandon Flehardy, 36, The Plague.
Plague. Andrew Rogers, 28, mac and cheese.
Mac and cheese. Nice job. And you've got the shovel and the mac and cheese in, right?
Yeah, gotta get it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks, brother. Have a great day.
You as well.